As everybody knows, we've been dealing with this pandemic, with this coronavirus pandemic for months now, since probably early January. And for those of you who might not know the definition of a pandemic is a disease that's prevalent over an entire country or the world. So basically, we've been dealing with this coronavirus pandemic throughout the world for many, many months. And really, my heart goes out to the so many people that have died, almost 100,000 people in this country alone. And my heart goes out to the families and everyone that's been suffering through this. But there really is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll talk about that today and figure out how CHIP really is involved in that. Since January, when you turn on the television, you listen to the news, radio, whatever, all you're hearing about is the coronavirus pandemic. But what we have never really heard about, and we've been dealing with this for decades now, most physicians and most healthcare providers have been dealing with multiple pandemics simultaneously. And let me explain that. In most developed countries, and certainly in the United States, the majority of adults have at least one chronic illness, and many people have actually more than one chronic illness that they're dealing with. The most common that we know is cardiovascular disease, heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all lumped in there. But many of the other chronic illnesses are pandemics also: diabetes, obesity, dementia, osteoarthritis. So most primary care physicians deal with more than one pandemic simultaneously. And this is something that I did for the 26 years that I've been practicing medicine. So the reason for talking about this is to figure out, how do we actually deal with these chronic illnesses, with these multiple pandemics? How do we educate the population of people that we have the honor of serving, so that they can mitigate their risks, minimize their risk of chronic illness and disease? And where does CHIP actually fall into that? So CHIP and the Lifestyle Medicine Institute are really the foundation, or they're foundational in what we can use. These are foundational tools that we can use to really help deal with all of these chronic pandemics. So let me ask you one question. What is the one thing that you do on a daily basis that impacts your health probably more than anything else? That one thing, I'll give you a second to think about it, is really what we eat. What we eat on a daily basis impacts our health tremendously. And everything that you consume, and most people will eat 3 times a day, many people eat a lot more than that. The choices that you make on a daily basis either will direct you down the road towards risk factors and disease, or hopefully direct you down the road towards health and wellness and vitality. So what we consume on a daily basis has a tremendous impact on our lives in general. The organization that I worked for 26 years almost, the Lee Memorial Health System, now has completed about 19 CHIP programs. And it was always interesting for me to talk to the people that were involved in the program. And I got the sense sometimes that individuals involved in the program thought that they were selling a CHIP kit, if you will. And that was really concerning to me, because the CHIP program is such a significant part of health and wellness. And what I always say to people is, CHIP has the ability to be a healthcare solution. CHIP really is a healthcare solution. It's the solution to the healthcare problems that so many millions of people deal with across the country, that we really have to look at what CHIP is from a completely different perspective. The healthcare system that we deal with today is really not a healthcare system. It's a sick care system. People get sick, we try to cure them. That doesn't work in most cases. And then we have to figure out, what do we do from there? So I think we have to look at our system and look at the fact that we really need to have a paradigm shift in what the system is all about. All of us have the job responsibility of, as healthcare providers, to do no harm. And if you think about it, if we let people get sick, and then we try to cure them, we're essentially involved in that harm, if you will. So again, I think what's really needed is a paradigm shift in how we look at healthcare, how we look at wellness and prevention. How do we change this whole, how do we change behavior in such a way so that we can really do something different? And then the conversation really goes into when you talk to people that have chronic illnesses and they say, well, you know, I think this is just part of my family history. I inherited this cardiovascular disease, or I was genetically predisposed to diabetes, or whatever illness we're talking about. When you think about what people actually inherit, they actually inherit a bad lifestyle. They inherit an unhealthy lifestyle. It's not really that they inherit bad genes. It's what they've been given is knowledge about a way of living. It might be healthy, it might not. For the standard American individual, it's really not a healthy lifestyle. So given the fact that food really plays such a dramatic part in our health in general, where does the CHIP solution fit in? And I think, again, this becomes the foundation for all of these pandemics that we're dealing with. We're going to take a minute to look at a video. I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of presentations. I write for the local newspaper, and I often recommend that people look at the YouTube video called Make Health Last. So we're going to take a minute just to look at that video, and then I'll come back on the screen.
What will your last 10 years look like? Will you be quick enough for a game of tag with your grandchild? Strong enough to embrace every moment? Will you grow old with vitality? Or get old with disease? It's time to decide. The average Canadian will spend their last 10 years in sickness. Change your future.
Wow, that's pretty impactful, isn't it? When I do my live public speaking presentations, I don't actually look at the screen anymore. I look at the individuals that are in the audience, and invariably you'll see multiple people with tears in their eyes. And you know, I always get choked up even watching this video because it's so dramatic, and the dichotomy with the same guy on the split screen is really amazing. When you think about it, most people in this country spend the last 10 years of their lives in sickness and not in wellness. And it's really impactful what the narrator says. He talks specifically and asks the question, will you grow old with vitality, or will you get old with disease? And most people in this country, as they get older, they get old with disease. And that really is not the way we should be growing older, if you will. If you look at blue zones, the places in the world where there are more centenarians than any place else in the world, these individuals don't get old with disease. They grow older with vitality. They focus on eating healthy, being physically active, getting enough sleep, having good social support, all of the foundations of lifestyle medicine, if you will, that really make such a big difference. So at the end of the video, the Make Health Last video, he says it's time to decide. And I think that's what we really need to do on a daily basis. So for the CHIP facilitators that are listening today, I'd like you to really highlight those questions and those statements with your clients. This really becomes a call to action. What will you do differently as a result of the show today and listening to that video and thinking about the value of CHIP? This is really your call to action to talk to your clients and your patients about it's time to decide what are you willing and able to do so that you make sure that you stay healthy. Before we move on any further, I just want to highlight the fact that if you have any questions, you can put them into the chat box, and I'll be able to look at those questions so that I can answer some. Actually, we do have a question now. What food specifically helps strengthen the immune system? This is a great question, whoever put this in there, against the coronavirus. Coronavirus obviously has been top of mind now for months and months, and it's something that everybody is concerned about. And the question has come up numerous times already. Unfortunately, we haven't heard enough of the answers. So let me focus on that because it is so important. The foods that you eat on a daily basis will either strengthen your immune system or they do just the opposite. If we look at the standard American foods that people eat, it really falls into two categories, meat and dairy. And we know for a fact that meat and dairy are actually harmful to the immune system because a lot of what's in those food products are omega-6 fatty acids. So they are inflammatory. And if you look at the basis for the foundation or the reason for so many of the chronic illnesses, the foundation is inflammation. Inflammation causes cardiovascular disease. It inflames the inside lining of your arteries. It has to do with diabetes. There's a big component with all of the rheumatologic diseases. So how do you strengthen your immune system? One way that you do that is by eating whole foods, lots of plant-based foods, fresh vegetables, fruits, and non-meat proteins. I really think that that is a significant part of the answer. So if you're eating foods that have less pesticides, less chemicals in there, when you look at a food product, if you look at a label and there are things listed on the label that you can't even understand what they are, those are mostly chemicals that we know will cause more inflammation. So the short answer is do everything that you can to decrease inflammation in your body. Eat whole foods, lots of vegetables every day, non-meat proteins. Make sure that you don't eat too many proteins because too much protein is actually bad for your kidneys. And then the other things that are really important to decrease inflammation is to make sure that you decrease the stress in your life. Do you have healthy relationships? Do you do things that really lower your stress level? Do you get enough sleep? Sleep is really important to minimize inflammation in your body. Do you have a reason to get out of bed in the morning? I jump out of bed most mornings because I'm so passionate about what we do that it really helps to lower my stress level. It gives me a reason to get out of bed and a purpose. So all of those things are really important to affect the strength of your immune system. What foods help against osteoporosis? Okay, it's really interesting. I've had a number of patients with osteopenia, which is weakness of the bones, or osteoporosis, which is even more weakness of the bones, if you will. And the foods that strengthen have calcium in them and vitamin D, which is something that we get from the sun and the conversion of what happens in your body. So anything that has calcium and vitamin K2 will help to strengthen your bones. And it's oftentimes, what I hear from a lot of my patients oftentimes is that they take lots of calcium supplements, but they don't eat the foods that really give them calcium. So green leafy vegetables, making sure that you get a little bit of sunshine every day, not too much because of the risk of skin cancers. But if your vitamin D level is low, that's going to give you more of a risk for osteoporosis and osteopenia. So in those cases, you really do need to take a vitamin D supplement. And as I mentioned before, I live in Florida. We check all of our patients for vitamin D, and despite the fact that we live in a sun-filled climate most of the time, the majority of the patients that I check are actually low in vitamin D. So it's one of the tests now that we added to our routine screening tests for our wellness exams. And then we just supplement with usually 5,000, 6,000 units of vitamin D every day. We're moving forward with making sure that CHIP is available face-to-face, hopefully sooner than later when we can get back to normal living. and actually be in the same room with people, which would be great. But the digital version of CHIP and doing this online is also extremely useful. So on a week-to-week basis, we'll look at the modules that are in the CHIP program, and we'll talk about what's the value of, as we did today, what's the value of food? What is the health value of sleep, of managing your stress, of physical activity, of socialization, of meditation, all of those things that we will hear more about as each week goes on. Also with the sessions, with these weekly sessions, I'll talk more about what my role is. As the medical director for CHIP and for Lifestyle Medicine Institute, I want to be a resource for people that are participating in CHIP, a resource for the facilitators, and making sure that we work together as a team so that we can really improve the lives of the people that we serve. I always ask the physicians that I work with, do you know if you're helping to make your patients healthier? Because that's really all that matters. One of the guys that I worked with for a number of years was great. He had a plaque on his desk and it said, "Tell me why it's right for the patient." And if we really always get back to that focus, what is our intention? Our intention is to really try to help people get healthy. That's why we do CHIP, why we do all the things that we do as healthcare providers. So you have to continue to ask yourself that question. Am I doing everything as a CHIP facilitator, as someone involved in CHIP, to move in the direction of greater health? We got another question coming in. During quarantine, is it safe to exercise outdoors? And would you recommend going back to the gym? I think right now, the second question is well, they're both very important, but the second question about getting back into society, if you will, getting closer to other people is obviously still a risk. If one individual was exposed to someone that had the coronavirus, that person is at risk. So now you coming in contact with that individual could be problematic for you. So I think running back to the gym right away right now is a risk that I'm not sure is worth taking. Personally, I exercise now outside and in my garage, because when you're outside, if you're running or biking or doing something where you're really not close to other people, I think it's actually safer than going to the gym. I know that lots of people, it's really amazing what's happened over the past several months. You can't go out and buy a bicycle anymore because everybody bought them up already. But, bicycle riding, running, jogging, being out there on your own really is certainly less of a risk than going to the gym. I bought some weights for the garage, and that's definitely part of the exercise regimen that I do myself. And I tell all my patients to be sure that they're weightlifting, because again, weightlifting, is, in addition to aerobic exercise, is tremendously valuable for your health in general. So I guess the answer is it's probably safer to be outside than going to the gym right now. Is it harmful to eat non-organic vegetables? If you have to choose between not eating any vegetables at all and eating non-organic vegetables, you should obviously eat the vegetables even though you're not buying organic vegetables. But when we look at which vegetables you actually need to eat organically or should eat organically, it would be the ones that are most laden with pesticides. So anything that has a thin skin. Dr. Greger has a list of them on his website, nutritionfacts.org. He's a great resource for healthy eating and nutrition in general. So things like bananas and oranges and avocados and pineapples, vegetables that have and fruits that have a thick skin, you really don't need to buy organically. Everything else that has a thin skin, all of the grapes and the berries and anything else, green leafy vegetables, you want to try if you can to buy organically. And I know I've discussed this with my patients in the past, and even friends and family that say, well, it's too expensive to eat organically. I can't do that. Well, number one, the question that I always ask them is there anything else more important for you to spend your money on than your health? Obviously, it's a rhetorical question. It should be a rhetorical question. The answer should be no. So you really want to try to do the best that you can with buying foods that really will give you the foundation for health. If you can't afford to buy organic foods in the supermarket, try to find a local farmer's market, because they're always much less expensive than buying them in the grocery store. Someone writes in, I have 100 pounds to lose. How can I be successful with CHIP? Fabulous question. You can absolutely be successful with CHIP, because I think CHIP points you in the right direction. It gives you the knowledge in your kitchen, in your grocery store, when you go out to eat. It gives you the ability to not only know what you need to do to stay healthy in relation to food, but actually to do that practically when you're making your choices in the grocery store and in the restaurants, when you're cooking at home for yourself and your family. And I can tell you, as I mentioned before, we've run 19 CHIP programs, and I've had experience talking to so many other individuals that have run CHIP programs. One of the first patients that I helped was a young 16-year-old kid that he started out at 345 pounds. In a year, doing a plant-based diet, exercising, and several other things that we worked on with him, he lost 130 pounds in 1 year. So for the individual, and I'll tell you, you can contact me directly. I would be glad to work with you. I think it's a tremendous honor and an opportunity to work with people to improve their health and to have them not only lose weight, but just become healthier. So I'm going to throw that out as an opportunity. Where can I find the last video that you showed the last 10 years? Actually, if you just go online on YouTube and put in "Make Health Last," that'll bring up the video for you. And if you haven't, this is the first time you've ever seen that video, watch it again and watch it every single time you start to fall off the wagon. If you're one of the CHIP participants that's watching today, or even if you're a CHIP facilitator, use that over and over again, because I think when things are going in the wrong direction, we always need something that motivates us back in the right direction. So use that as a motivational tool. How do you want to spend the last 10 years of your life? Do you want to grow old with vitality, or do you want to get old with disease? And look at the data and the stories that have come out of the blue zones. The blue zones, again, as I mentioned before, these are places in the world where there are more centenarians, more people in their hundreds than any place else in the world. Sardinia, Italy, Icaria, Greece, Okinawa, Japan, Loma Linda, California. Look at those places and figure out, why is it that these people actually live so long? They live so long and they live healthy, and they die of old age because they eat healthy food. They're physically active on a regular basis. They get enough sleep. They have great social support, people around them that help them to lower their overall stress because they're not worried about getting older. You mentioned K2 food sources, and what about B12? So again, green leafy vegetables for all of the B vitamins, as well as A, D, E, and K. You do have to get, and maybe in another session we'll talk a little bit more about healthy fats. Vitamin B12 certainly should be a supplement that we take when you're eating more plant-based foods, because B12 primarily comes from animal foods. So you want to supplement with B12 for sure. That's an important one to measure. As I mentioned before, about when you get your blood tested, make sure that you're also asking your physician or healthcare provider to check your B12 level, to check your iron level, to check your level of vitamin D, so that we can supplement if necessary. The vitamins should certainly be coming from your food primarily, but if you're not absorbing enough, we can talk about that in further sessions, but you can also use supplements. At this point, we're going to wrap up the questions. What I'd really like to do is end off by saying thank you for participating. Thank you for being either a CHIP participant or a CHIP facilitator or just a healthcare provider in general, which is a great profession to have, and it's an honor to be involved in this. I'd like to invite you all back next Wednesday. We're going to be doing this every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Ask Dr. Sal show will continue. This is the first show, so thank you for participating, and have a healthy and a happy day. God bless you all.